got yourself plugged in. You know that these things are available on the website. Assuming that Richard records them. So if he's sick, we're in trouble. So what do you believe in? When I say that I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, I get asked that a lot. And it's the sort of question that makes my mind swirl. Because it's a question with 1,000 answers. And sometimes I wish I could be really snarky and say something like, well, I believe in the power of questions. And I think, that's going to disarm them a little bit, as if we were in a sparring match, but it doesn't really respect the question. It might be asked with great sincerity, asked by somebody who's hurting, looking for a safe harbor in life. What do you believe in? What are they thinking? How can I treat them with compassion without putting myself above them, sounding all intellectual or dismissive? What do you believe in? Well, I might say, in our faith, we're better at answering the question, what do you have faith in? Because if I were to say the phrase, we believe in, from the pulpit right now, some of you might find yourselves following with the words, one God, the Father Almighty. And indeed, there's 4 belief statements in the Nicene Creed that Catholics and Episcopalians and Lutherans and Presbyterians and many other folks across the country are reciting right this minute. And the Nicene Creed is an interesting one. It was used to divide the heretic from the true believer in the late Roman Empire. And while some folks celebrate its great clarity in saying exactly what people believe, I tend to see the blood of the people killed by that creed and the minds closed by imperial certainty. And so, though I probably wouldn't be hurting anybody, I'm very shy at saying the statement, I believe. I'm much happier saying what I have faith in. Both the Unitarians and the Universalists have, in their history, spent time composing sets of beliefs. And at one point, the Universalists actually expelled a minister. Did you know that, Richard? They actually expelled a minister for violating their belief statement. He was preaching Unitarianism. And even within my lifetime, I grew up in a Unitarian church up in Winchester, Massachusetts, and it was considered a sort of a high Unitarian church. And it was very unlike this congregation. First, the building had this large, huge organ behind the pulpit with pipes everywhere, like rows and rows, what are they called? Ranks and ranks of pipes everywhere. And there was stained glass in every window. And down the bottom, there was a little plaque that says who'd given the window. And there was carved wood up the walls and all over across the ceiling, crisscrossing the ceiling. And there was a really ornate pulpit, and then there was an ornate lectern. And in the center, there was an altar table, not too different from this one, but in the center was a golden cross. Every service had the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, which seemed normal to me because, after all, we said it each morning in school, too. But there was also the statement, we believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. We said it every week, and it also appeared on a small plaque by the doors of the sanctuary. So people knew what they were going to get into when they came in the doors, I guess. I went back 2 years ago for my father's memorial service. The plaque was gone and long since painted over, so you couldn't tell that it had ever been there. The words were no longer in the service. There was no sign of the Lord's Prayer either. That statement of beliefs that I just read took a lot of bashing in the 20th century. Not only for its sexist language, its non-universalist concept of salvation, and its paternal vision of God, and the derivation of leadership from conflicting and fragmentary remembrances of a man 2,000 years dead, but also for the presumption that the human race would progress onward and upward forever. After World War II and Nazism, and also the atom and then hydrogen bomb, people asked, was this progress? Could we count on the world improving? Are we heading towards utopia or towards dystopia? What do you believe in? This, it seems, is a rather new question. I wonder what it was like to live in England during the reign of Henry VIII. It was probably very muddy, but what I wanted to point out was not the actual mud, but rather that there was a point, there was a moment where you went into the market on a Thursday or some such, and suddenly the Pope went from being a good guy to being a bad guy as England became Anglican. And then there were other kings that followed and queens, and the belief flip-flopped a few more times. Pope good, Pope bad, Pope good, Pope bad. It's rather like the novel 1984, speaking of dystopias, where the government could suddenly change the statement, we have always been at war with Eurasia, to we have always been at war with East Asia. And everyone followed. So let's follow that to the American colonies. We're here in West Jersey here. Did everybody realize that? And our established religion was Quakerism. Over in Tuckerton, they were in East Jersey, and their established religion was Presbyterianism. And if there were disagreements about the beliefs of either of those religions, they were handled in the religions process, either by the meeting, the annual meeting or the quarterly meeting here, or over in Tuckerton, by the session. But then consider Massachusetts. Massachusetts was a Puritan state. And what happened in the 1800s was really rather unusual. The religious beliefs of the congregations were undergoing change. And what happened was that at a congregational meeting sometime around 1820, plus or minus a few years, the congregation had to vote on the understanding of religion that they believed. Nobody ever had to vote on this stuff before. Suddenly, they didn't get it told in the marketplace. They had to actually figure it out themselves. As the Unitarian Church and the Congregationalist Church split, the person in the pews had to make a theological decision. Do I stay with the established church, or do I go off with the group that's the splinter group? Suddenly it was personal. It wasn't the state's job to decide what you believed. It was your job. Two religions diverged. And which road did your congregation travel? Now, I've not done a study, but I suspect that this schism had a profound effect on the creative life in Massachusetts, leading to bold voices like Channing's, like Ralph Waldo Emerson's, and like Henry David Thoreau's. without a state religion to hold them back, several in the Unitarian path turned the congregation from which belief is going to get you to God to the understanding that God dwells within everything, and the understanding called transcendentalism. And suddenly, for those who believed in it, there was no single answer to the question of belief. Everyone had the power. Everyone could decide. And we have Emerson's essay, Nature, where this quote comes from: "Build therefore your own world, as fast as you can conform your life to the pure idea in your mind that will unfold its great proportions." Was transcendentalism, the power of God within. It opened up a new area of thought. It provided the context for the subject of today's sermon, which we knew we'd get to eventually, from Transcendentalist Unitarian minister Frederick Henry Hedge, and how he envisioned the state of religion in the 19th century. By then, Unitarianism has existed for a generation, and the schism was pretty much complete. Hedge was able to step back, in his case, way, way back, and look at religion, Christian religion, as a broad church. He noted, for example, that it was really broad. The sun never set on Christendom, from Ceylon to, I suppose, almost even Hawaii. I don't know how far west he got, but the world sort of ended at the Rocky Mountains back in those days. There were churches called Christian around the world. But then he thought about a different sort of landscape. This was a landscape of belief. And I think we can imagine that today too. So over to the east is the orthodox or conservative aspect of a faith. We know that the sun will rise in the east. So that's where the truths of the faith are. The east is where the ancient beliefs reside, and those who protect them as well. And then over on the west, he has what he calls the river of free inquiry, where beliefs have mobility, variety, and progress. And it's very odd that these folks happen to have set up for their song over here in the west. But just like the United States at the time, the West was where the growth was happening. And so in Hedge's religious landscape, that was where free inquiry happened. Up to the north, we find strange things happen, like our compasses stop working. There are mysterious lights in the sky and fantastic weather. It's a land of mysticism, of idealism and feelings after God. Pentecostal ecstasy, righteousness, meteors of revelation. And then down to the south, we have what he called the organic church, which he defined as containing rituals and rites and symbols and sacraments. Every church requires symbols and norms of worship, he says. My childhood church had stained glass and a golden cross to define it. While here we have our chalice, we have our collection of food and other things for local charities. And we even have our moment of silence to define our southern point. And then Hedge said an odd thing. He said that a denomination, or even all of Christianity, remember he's writing in 1850, so he thinks it's the world of belief. Every church requires all four directions. Oh, wait a minute, I got to do this right. All four directions to survive. Did I do that for you or did I do it for me? Anyway, we need the stability on the east. We need the experimentation on the west, the idealism and personal relationship on the north, and the ritual on the south. All four cardinal constituents are part of the faith, and they're bound together with love, which he says is manifest in works of social reform. If it's all frozen in theology, then the church fades away. If it's all mystical inspirations, then it will drift to pieces. If it's all expression of new ideas and postmodern tearing down of the world as we know it, the radicals are soon going to find themselves alone. And if it's only rituals, where do adherents put their faith into action? He said that Unitarianism needed all four extremes of that geography and the entire landscape in between. In addition, he said, without engagement in the world, sharing the love and charity and support we each have within us, there is no binding. We need diversity and mutuality. And that's the vision of the broad church that Frederick Henry Hedge had. But what about today? Well, Hedge's model is only a model. It's not divine truth. Well, maybe somebody thinks it is, but I don't think it is. I think it's just a model. And we can use it as a lens to see ourselves. Do we have our mystics in the congregation who have come to share their revelations? Do we have our free thinkers in the congregation? Our ritualists, our traditionalists? But most of all, do we have love? Do we express love? Do we live love? Hedge tells us that creeds, belief tests, doctrine, and conformity would kill our ability to love. Indeed, we see in our world that there are many faith communities that are bound together by hatred, erecting walls, censoring words not in alignment with their own. I took a moment to teach about the Hanukkah candles this morning to show how each candle is, at one point, the most important candle. I have faith in diversity. Hedge tells us that it's not toleration of diversity, that diversity is the landscape. Now, our OWL program, celebrates diversity too. And as you know, I told you that each age group teaches age-appropriate sexuality information. And I've been trained on the adult and on the high school level of OWL, and did a class in California. The high school one has an interesting feature to it. It includes a slideshow on lovemaking. Yes, indeed. I thought it was an odd topic to bring into a sermon too, but there's actually a point here. The students in the class are young men and young women, and some are probably straight, and others may be gay or bisexual. So the slides are divided. 1/3 of them are on heterosexual lovemaking, 1/3 on lesbian lovemaking, and 1/3 on gay men's lovemaking. But you might say, most of the teens are going to be straight. Why don't we concentrate on that and then maybe mention lesbians and gay sex in some other time? That's one way to think about it. But let's flip it over. Instead of thinking about the statistics of the group, let's think of one student taken out of the group. Okay, we don't know anything about that student's gender or sexual orientation. But we do know that at least 1/3 of the slides will speak to them, no matter what. We're now honoring each teen's worth and dignity by including diversity in the lesson. It's a kind of a hard concept to grasp. We have to unthink our statistical minds. But think for a moment about today. In my sermon so far, there were 3 white men that I used as sources. There were no women's voices. There wasn't really all that much diversity in it all. Fortunately, Dar Williams has done something that I didn't do. She gave us some diversity of voices. And I want to read a couple of the verses from her song. So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able. And where does the magic come from? I think the magic's in the learning, because now the Christians sit with pagans. Only pumpkin pies are burning. When Amber tried to do the dishes, her aunt said, "Really, don't bother." Amber's uncle saw how Amber looked like Tim and like her father. He thought about his brother, how they hadn't spoken in a year. And he thought he'd call him up and say, "It's Christmas and your daughter's here." It's one of the blessings is that we can stand on our principles and be divided, or we can see love in each other's faces and come together, not out of belief, out of faith in the love that we share with each other. So I have faith that diversity will feed my soul and the souls of others. I have faith that this community can work miracles. And I have faith in love. Amen. Speaking of diversity, note that during the week before Christmas, we have a solstice celebration on Wednesday. We have a musical celebration on Friday night at the Greenlight Coffee House. And then we have a Christian celebration on Christmas Eve. I encourage you all to attend all these diverse events. And now I encourage you to, as you are willing and able, to rise in body or in spirit, to sing our closing hymn, which is number 23, Bring Many Names, number 23.